philosopher and thinker in Iran today. In the last few years, his work has become fairly widely known outside Iran, but at the same time his writings are only now starting to be translated into English. He's known to non-Persian speakers, in other words, mainly through commentaries on his work, rather than through people having been able to read his work, or indeed to have the opportunity to hear him talk. So I think we're extremely lucky indeed to have him today to talk to us. Perhaps his best-known writings are those concerned with the theoretical expansion and contraction of the Sharia, Abd al-Bast, dating from about 10 years ago. The title which he's going to talk to today is Islam and Pluralism, but I have a feeling he may also be reflecting for us on his theoretical expansion and contraction theory as well. I think without further ado, I will ask Dr. Soroush to address us.
Shall I stand or just...
Well, I think
everybody can hear me, I think. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks all of the respectable audience who are here, and I am extremely delighted.
It is possible to stand.
That would be better, huh?
I can hear people doing that in the background.
Yeah,
Sorry, we don't have an amplification.
Well, you have to cope with it, because my voice is always soft, and so this may not be cured in one session. So anyway, I will be... The subject which I would like to present here will be very brief and very simple. Of course, I have to draw on some historical materials in order to make my case as clear as possible. Nevertheless, the whole issue of the Islam and pluralism, I hope, will be clarified by the end of this very cordial and friendly lecture, I would say. Now, the story, of course, goes back to perhaps more than 10 years ago. That's 30 years ago, I would say, when I became for the first time familiar with Rumi, the most important and the most popular mystic poet of Iran and the Persian language. Of course, this remarkable man needs no further introduction. I mean, those who are familiar with Persian literature, with Islamic literature, will know him very well. He was one of the greatest mystic poets, and to me he was the seal of all mystics in our history, and his important book, which is called Masnavi, is still being read, being studied, and will be being commented on it. And fortunately there is a very good translation of the book in English by Nicholson, who translated it about 60 years ago, and it is now available. And so those people who do not know him very well, or who have not heard of him, better go to the work and to make familiar for themselves. So that was the starting point for me to think seriously and in earnest about pluralism. Of course, the idea, or perhaps even the word or the concept of pluralism, was not familiar to me at that time. Definitely in Iran we did not really talk and write about pluralism, especially religious pluralism. But by and by, when I continued my study on Rumi, and then I became familiar with Hafiz and all other Persian poets and thinkers, of late I embarked on the theory of expansion and contraction of religious knowledge, or Sharia, as Professor Tupper mentioned, and there actually I was able to recruit all what I had learned before through Rumi and Hafiz and all other thinkers, and then in order to combine them and to formulate them in a new way, and to lay the foundations not only for religious or Islamic pluralism, but also for a kind of religious or Islamic democracy. In brackets, I would like to mention here that for a religious democracy we need two pillars. One is the religious pluralism, which I think I have laid the foundation for, and I am going to give you a brief exposition of that. And then we need, of course, another theory, which is the theory for the human rights. For that theory, of course, we need a new theory or a new philosophy of man. There we have to lay the foundation for human rights, and then we have to combine it with the theory of religious pluralism in order to have both pillars of a religious democracy. So far we have been able, I would say, in our country, me and my colleagues who work together, to provide a theory for the religious pluralism. As to the second pillar, of course, we are working, and that is, of course, altogether a different issue, a different story which has to be told elsewhere. Now, as to the religious pluralism, of course, we not only draw on the Western literature and on the writings of the thinkers here, but also we have got a very, very precious treasure of the mystical poetry and mystical thinking in our own tradition. And there, of course, we can get a lot of good and important and useful ideas in order to provide a theory for religious pluralism. Mysticism has been always a source of tolerance, but this tolerance, of course, has got to have a theoretical basis. Otherwise, it would be an emotional thing which will go away very easily and simply. So, in mysticism, you can find a theory for tolerance, and this theory is basically a theory of pluralistic thinking about religions. Rumi and Hafiz, who are two main sources for me, and who are two main personalities from whom I have learned a lot about religious pluralism, their theories or their visions about pluralism, of course, are different. One of them I would call a positive view of pluralism, and the other one I would call the negative. In Rumi, of course, you have got the idea that since we have got a host of truths, since there are the accumulation of truths, because of the interwovenness of truth everywhere, because of the multidimensionality of reality, we have to have a pluralism. He mentions this issue of 72 sectarian groups in Islam, as you are familiar with. There is a tradition coming from Prophet. It may not be that authentic, but nevertheless it is very widely held by all Muslims that after the Prophet, Muslims actually divided into 72 groups. Now, Rumi tells us that these 72 groups were the result of the multidimensionality of the religious truth. That is his idea, which I call it positive pluralism. Since we are rich, since reality is very rich enough, since there are different aspects to reality, to truth, therefore we become pluralistic, i.e. our understanding of reality will become inevitably diverse. So I will look at one dimension of the fact of truth or reality, you will look at another angle, and therefore we come the outcome will be different explanation and different visions of the same reality. This is because of the richness of the reality that a pluralism becomes inevitable. And the people who are wise enough, who are clever enough, and who try to understand the reality, they will necessarily have different ideas because of the multidimensionality of the reality. Now, in Hafiz, you have got a different view altogether. He thinks that these 72 sections or sects in Islam, they are there because of our ignorance of the truth. He says that since they did not see the truth, since they were innocent of truth, therefore they became 72 sects. His is a negative pluralism. Since we do not know the truth, since it is beyond our reach, since it is inaccessible, therefore out of ignorance we become diverse, we conflict, and the confrontations arise among us. So we have got two kinds of pluralism, and both come from our mystics, and both has got their basis in reality. In fact, of course, conflict among people actually stems from two different sources, and roughly one is because of the richness of the truth, and the other is because of our ignorance of the truth. So these two sources, we had it, and actually I noticed it in the literature and the tradition of our mystical thinkers. Now, when